Back in 2013, if you wanted to experience the best of Sony in a smartphone, you could have bought this, the Sony Xperia Z, released in 2013, costing about 624 Australian dollars outright from places like JB Hi-Fi. And I actually bought this phone for my mum about 10 years ago as a gift. I've still got it, and I think it's time to see whether in 2025 it's still usable. Thankfully, this is a 4G LTE capable phone, so it is still usable as a phone. 12 years later, let's see just how good this phone runs here in 2025. Believe it or not, Sony still sells smartphones, although the manufacturing is now entirely outsourced. But back in early 2013, an Xperia phone was a compelling option compared to Apple's iPhone and the other Android models of the time. I gave the phone you see here to my mum as a gift, and it saw many years of use. And as you can see, I kept all the packaging, only discovering it years later in a box that I'd stored away. Its whole life was spent inside a case, meaning it's still in decent condition today. The only wear is some scratches on the front and back glass from pocket sand grinding inside the flip case. So what else do you get in a premium smartphone box 12 years ago? Well, do you remember when phones came with a 3.5mm audio jack? Better yet, included earbuds? These look pretty decent, and I'll try them later in the video. Along with the user manuals is a bag you could send your old phone off in to help fund youth cancer research. I'm not sure if this program is still active though. Yes, you got extra earbud chips, and of course the charging cable as well. I must have lost the charging brick at some point, but it did come with one originally. This rather thin and sleek device originally shipped with Android 4.1 Jelly Bean, and after my mother upgraded, I restored it to factory settings and it hasn't been used since. I do have a feeling that most of the Sony software features are no longer supported, and after going through the initial setup, we are in old school Android. What would have made this a good phone to buy at the time? First of all, it was competitively priced against other flagship smartphones. When this thing first came out, for comparison, you could have bought Samsung's Galaxy Note 2 for about $100 more. However, the Note 2 was definitely on the larger side, and Sony was able to pack in a high-resolution 1080p display into this first Xperia. Impressively, this is almost the same pixel density as the display in my iPhone 15 Pro. The Xperia actually beats the iPhone in terms of thinness and doesn't even have a camera bump sticking out at all. Clearly, some parts of this phone have aged rather well. It's also including some long-forgotten features such as carry strap support, meaning there's no excuse for dropping this slippery little thing. And if you're rocking this thing without a case, be prepared for a lot of fingerprints. And if you need to charge any number of devices on the go, today's sponsor Ugreen has you covered. They've made a very compact and versatile power bank with a total output of 165 watts across all the ports, and best of all, there's a retractable USB-C cable, so you'll never be left without a charging cable again. A feature I really like is all the detailed information you get on the front screen. You can see the charging voltage and amps from all the outputs, which is perfect for people like me who love seeing all those metrics. With a 20,000 mAh capacity, it is airline safe and has enough juice to charge your phones, tablets, cameras, and much more, and can be charged fully in under 2 hours. And if you're on the road, you should definitely check out Ugreen's Fast Car Charger, which has the same convenient retractable charging cable and many high-powered outputs. If you want to find out more, click the links in the description below. Happy charging. You should, however, definitely prepare yourself for some software limitations. The latest Android updates only bring this thing to 5.1 officially. Unofficially, it can run newer versions through Lineage OS. However, all the download links for the ROMs no longer work. Android 5.1 Lollipop became unsupported in 2018, losing Google Play Store support mid-last year. And after some fiddling around, I was able to at least sign in, and there are still some compatible apps you can download. Sadly, a lot of Android phones from this time period didn't really get many updates for more than 1 or 2 Android versions. Let's not give up hope yet though. Sony usually excels when it comes to their cameras and optics. So how about we compare the photo and video capabilities of Apple's 2013 iPhone 5S? And oh my god, I forgot how small these things are in the hand. Smaller? Yes. Cheaper? No. The iPhone 5 and iPhone 5S released later in 2013 were about $150 more than the Xperia here in Australia. On paper, the Xperia has more megapixels and some advantages. They both record at 1080p 30 frames per second through their rear lenses. However, the iPhone's footage and stabilization simply looks far better. Inside the train station, the iPhone's shot looked far closer to what I saw with my own eyes. All of the footage I shot was done handheld, and yes, the video stabilizer is actually on for the Xperia, believe it or not. Outdoors with daylight is where the Xperia shines, producing far more pleasing, vibrant photos, having greater detail thanks to the higher megapixel count as well. How will the phones handle shooting video with a lot of sun glare? Neither was particularly good, but it's sad to see just how bad the Sony stabilization is. How will these vintage phones handle a backlit bridge? This is a tricky lighting scenario, and I prefer the cooler color temperature of the iPhone honestly. If you want to paddle along the River Torrens with Pluck a Duck over here, you can hire one of these colourful paddle boats on weekends. The Xperia handled the sun glare much better, producing a far nicer image in this case. I'd happily take either one of these phones to shoot outdoors with. Sometimes the iPhone gets it right, other times the Sony. If you like vibrant, higher contrast images, you'll prefer the processing Sony does in auto mode. In tricky lighting situations, I think Sony got it right quite often, when it comes to photos anyway. When it comes to video in low light, the iPhone is a clear winner hands down. Nighttime photography could go either way, both phones doing a reasonable job. The Morse balls proving a challenge for the Sony, other times taking a better shot than the iPhone. In some cases, the iPhone was simply unusable, refusing to focus on this tree even after several attempts. The Sony also has a resolution advantage with its front-facing selfie cam. Still image selfies have far greater detail with the Xperia thanks to the extra pixels. Something the iPhone could only dream of? Getting wet. Water resistance in 2013 was a pretty new thing, made possible with the use of many watertight doors over all the ports. The IP57 rating allows it to be submerged in a meter of water for up to 30 minutes, and be sure to close all the covers on the sides of the handset, and it actually took me ages to find the micro USB connector since it isn't even labeled. The phone will remind you to close these covers when you use the connectors underneath. And I do miss the days when phones had a headphone jack. This one hidden just like all the other ports, and I'm not entirely sure why one earbud cable is shorter. Perhaps that's so you can route it behind your head, and with very few apps available, I'm glad that Spotify was one of them. I was honestly very impressed by these earbuds, they sound great, and the built-in FM radio also still works perfectly. You do not see this feature in phones anymore. Since this is a 4G LTE capable handset, I thought I would try my Aldi mobile SIM, which I quickly realized I needed an adapter for. Nano SIMs weren't yet the universal standard back in 2013, so I improvised by aligning my Nano SIM in the larger SIM tray. I tried many times, however, it simply would not detect the SIM. I needed to find an adapter, and after a lot of searching, I found one in an old iPhone 4S. Finally, I could insert the SIM card correctly and it got recognized straight away. Aldi Mobile uses the Telstra network here in Australia. It simply doesn't work with this phone though. The Xperia is compatible with LTE bands 1, 3, 5, 7, 8 and 20. 2G and 3G networks have all shut down here in Australia, so 4G is the only option for this phone. As I eventually learnt, Vodafone's 4G network runs on most of the same bands as the Xperia, so I bought myself a cheap prepaid SIM to see if I can actually get this phone to work like a phone. I set up the new SIM and even tried connecting from the list of available operators, but it simply didn't work. It also didn't work using my partner's Optus SIM card. The Vodafone SIM I bought did work instantly in my iPhone, so I guess the old bands this Xperia uses are simply not compatible with the modern infrastructure. The select few compatible apps do run fine on here thankfully, so this phone isn't entirely useless yet. The stereo speakers are also impressive for a handset of this age. One of its strengths is clearly multimedia, and even full HD YouTube playback is possible. While this was clearly a decent phone at the time, there were simply so many other options to choose from. And most consumers chose the familiar, with Samsung and Apple being the biggest smartphone sellers at the time, and they still are today. The hardware is great, the software and long-term support though, very much lacking. Sony had too many products that overlapped in price, there was poor marketing, and a clear lack of confidence from Sony themselves. Today, it's no surprise their market share in the smartphone space is pretty much non-existent. Thank you very much for joining me on a journey using a very outdated smartphone. And back in 2013, compared to the high-end Samsungs and Apple iPhones of the time, this was a bit cheaper, so definitely a compelling option. A solid rear camera, water resistance, and a full 1080p display are some of the aspects that stood out to me here in 2025. And a big thanks to Ugreen for sponsoring this video and all the channel members that help make videos like this possible. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.